Hey y'all, it's Laura and welcome back to Scraplift Sunday. Now Miranda and I do this every other Sunday in every single month and have been for a couple of years. Today we're lifting a fantastic layout by Zsoka Marko. I think I said that right. I probably didn't. She's a fabulous designer and I will have her Instagram linked in the description box below so you can find more of her gorgeous work. But the basis of her layout is a beautiful mix of envelopes in the background, some stuffed with embellishments and tags, and others with photos. And I think there's just one large photo actually. But I decided to do a 3-photo layout because why not? I thought it'd be kind of fun to have all of those photos stuffed together into envelopes. So of course I have to make the envelopes. I'm working on a 9x12 background, and so I'm going to be making some smaller envelopes than she did. And I'm just going the easy route here, cutting squares, meeting the 2 corners in the middle, which is not perfect. It doesn't matter though, because these are all going to be layered on top of each other, so you're not going to see the whole envelope at any time. And probably heavily embellished, so I figured if they weren't perfect, it was no big deal, and probably nobody would notice. Now this particular one was my favorite pattern, and I didn't really want to cover up all of that floral. So this is the only envelope I end up closing. The rest of them will be open. Now Zsoka, no, I'm saying her name wrong. She had a few open and a few closed, and them all kind of piled up in the center. And I am going to do that, but most of mine will remain open. I pulled out a piece of 6x8 paper from a Jen Hadfield The Avenue collection. That floral at the top came from my October hip kit. And I don't know exactly where it came from, but it is beautiful. And so again, I'm showing you how I'm just very quickly making these envelopes. Nothing fancy, no measuring, just going for it. And you know what? I think it works out pretty well. I was kind of impressed with myself, to be honest. And once I make a whole bunch of these off camera, because it's a pretty simple process, I didn't think I needed to show you how to make each and every single one. So I just did 2 so you could see how you could quickly do this yourself. I do bend over the top of all of the envelopes just to give them a nice crease, make them pop up a little bit. So here's the little ones that I made, all with 6x8 papers of varying sizes. The smallest one, I believe, was with a 4x4 piece. The next size up was with a 5x5, and then the rest of them were all 6x6 papers. And that was the predominant size that I used because I thought it would fit pretty well on the 9x12. So playing around with these different sized envelopes to just give the impression that they're kind of thrown on the page without being too random. Is that a thing? I'm not sure, but I decided to go ahead and do that, but I wanted to be able to see all of the patterns. That was pretty important. So taking all of these down, taping them, I flipped them over, tape them in place, and then flip them back. Luckily it worked. Sometimes it does not, but this time it did. And so taking my 3 photos of my daughter Sophia and her favorite bear and her little adventures that they would go on just absolutely cracked me up. So I thought it would be a really cute little layout to make, and I'm just tucking the pictures into the envelopes and around this closed envelope in a bit of a cluster here in the center. I will be filling the rest of these envelopes with tags and ephemera and some bits and pieces that are left over in this October hip kit. And I have some cut aparts here left over from a kit from Photo Play that I worked with earlier this week, and decided to go ahead and pull those out and use them because they worked well color-wise. And after I mounted each of them onto the cut aparts, I am going to go ahead and just tuck them into the layers there and start my embellishing. Now, one of the things that I kept in mind when creating this layout is I wanted to use simple patterns. And the reason for that is because I noticed in the original layout that a lot of her patterns kind of overpowered the photo. It actually took me a minute to find the photo on her page because her patterns were so loud and proud and they were double-sided papers. Two, so the insides of the envelopes also had additional patterns, and it just seemed very overwhelming to the page, even though it was absolutely gorgeous in its finished state. I did have trouble finding her photo, which was black and white and still didn't pop on the page. So I decided that I really wanted my photos to be the focus, and so I went with one-sided paper so that the inside was white, which didn't add in additional patterns. And I decided to use very simple, mostly monochromatic papers so that they didn't draw so much attention away from my photos and instead complemented them. That's just my take on it, just my perspective. Obviously, we all scrap differently, and however you want to scrap is completely fine. No rules in scrapbooking, as I break them if there were. So while I'm tucking in little bits and pieces, I did manage to get a bike on this one. I was so proud of myself. There are so many bikes in the collections this year. It seems like this was the year of the bicycle, because I have tons of them left over at the end of every collection. And I decided, go with it. These are outdoor photos. Let's throw a bike in the mix. And I was tempted to pull it out at the last minute, but I didn't. I left it in place. And I actually think it blends in quite nicely and doesn't draw too much attention to itself. So grabbing some tags that were in the hip kit as a cut apart sheet, and just tucking a few of those in the top, some smaller tags in the smaller envelopes at the bottom, making sure not to overlap my photos too much because I don't want them to disappear into the background. I still want them to be at the forefront because really the photos are telling the story this time. I will be adding journaling, but not a ton, and I really want the photos to kind of pull at your heartstrings a little bit. They're really sweet photos, and I thought that it would be particularly poignant to have those photos be the ones telling the story. So I'm layering in some little houses, another major theme this year, a lot of icons of that one. Considered using a couple of these people, but after I got it fully embellished, I felt like they were drawing too much attention to themselves. They are super cute, and I really like them, and I think at this point, had I just stuck with the one person, I probably could have gotten away with it. But when I put the second one on, I felt like they were just drawing too much attention away from the photos, because in the photos, you can't see my daughter's face full on. One, she's walking away from me, another one, she's walking to the side, and the third just has the bear. So I didn't think it was helpful to have a little person whose face you do see full on, because it was drawing attention away from my photos. Now, had these pictures featured a photo of her fully on in the front of her face, then it probably wouldn't have been as big a deal. But because they don't, she's so small in these photos, these are 3x4 photos, I felt like it just pulled way too much attention away from her. So I'm trying to use up the last bits and pieces of this kit, which also has several things added in from October's stash kit, which was featuring the same collection from Jen Hadfield. And I've added to it, and I need to just finish this kit. So I'm adding all the things on here, as well as some little fussy cut butterflies that I cut out of a 6x8 piece of patterned paper. And I'm just going to start arranging things, and then I'll glue it all down off camera, because you don't need to watch that. That just takes forever. So here's where I brought in the second girl, and I thought, well, I've got one girl on the page, surely I can get two. And I tried her in a couple of places. Honestly, right here, I should have just left her there, because her red shirt blends in, dark hair blends into the bear, and she didn't draw that much attention to herself. But once I put her up at the top, I felt like my eyes went straight to the girls and not to the photos. And for me, nah, that's a deal breaker. Not gonna work. So I did end up pulling them both off at the end. I do get a couple of DIY embellishments on here that I made last month, and these are some cork embellishments that I stamped and built embellishment clusters from. So I did get I think there's only maybe one more left at the end of this layout, which is awesome. Love when I can use them all up. I didn't end up doing DIY embellishments this month, I just realized. I intended to, never got around to it. There's always next month. But I did get to use these up, which I was excited about. And I thought maybe tucking this one up here by the bicycle would kind of camouflage it into the background a little bit, and I wouldn't notice it as much. I do end up not doing that, and the bike ends up being a little bit more predominant than I had intended. So here's where I figured out that I really would prefer for this heart to be closer to the photo to help draw your eye to the photo, and the bike actually stays showing. I pull out the girls to see if I like it without them, and I really did. Tucked in this little honeycomb bee's nest. I don't really know. I just like the color, and by tucking it in, you can't really tell what it's supposed to be. And then adding in some more little cork hearts around the page to carry that cork theme. And then I'll add some washi at the bottom. So this layout is almost done, believe it or not. Just have to do my scattering and splattering once I get this washi down. I did 2 layers of washi. It is a little hard to see that bottom layer here, and I apologize for that. I didn't realize how close my camera was to the mat, but it says "Tell Your Story" over and over again on a black background, and it's from Vicki Boutin, and it's in her new Storyteller collection. And the other tape that I used is also from that collection, and it's just a gold stripe. So I'm going to layer the 2 of those at the bottom, just like the original layout did. And then I'm going to lift up that home at the bottom so that it sits on top of the washi and not underneath. I was really happy to use up these ephemera pieces that were left over from the Avenue because I wasn't sure that I would get to it. But they fit quite nicely on here, and they made a nice little staggered title that kind of blended into that bottom border and just kind of rests on it. It's almost like the rest of it is just exploding out from behind that border, and I kind of love that fun, playful feel. Adding some little butterfly trails with Nuvo, as well as just dotting it around the page for some controlled splattering. Then I'll come in with my gold ink for some uncontrolled splattering. I do love a bit of uncontrolled splattering. It just adds a little bit of whimsy, a little bit of fun onto the end of the page. I do, though, and add a little bit of journaling as well. Almost forgot, because I wanted some just a sentence, really, to talk about Sophia and her bear and how they went everywhere for a while. And so I cut up a journaling card into paper strips, and I'm going to have 3 lines of journaling just on top of this black and white envelope, which in my mind was standing out a little bit too much anyway. And so by adding the paper strips on top, it broke up the pattern and made it a little less intense. It also functioned as holding my journaling, so double use. So I will tape those down and then add a quick sentence about Sophia and the bear and the date, and then come in with that uncontrolled splattering. I hope you like my take on this Scraplift Sunday. And Miranda, I thank you so much for picking this challenge layout. I loved it. It was so much fun and easier than I expected. So make sure to check out Miranda's channel, and until next time, bye!